Hello and welcome to my talk for the Experimental Photo Festival, Eco-Conscious Thoughts for a Sustainable Photo Future. I'm Josie Purcell, an eco-conscious photographic artist based in Cornwall, UK. I'm really excited to be here with the Experimental Photo Festival, and in this presentation I'll be guiding you through my perception of eco-conscious and sustainable photography. It is my intention that this will support the many practical examples of eco-photographic and sustainable processes and thinking shared during the festival. I hope it will provide a space for a deeper consideration of your motivations to work in a more eco-aware fashion through your photographic practice. My credentials for this include setting up the first socially engaged eco-darkroom Shutterpod in Cornwall in 2011. Or perhaps I should say sunroom, as I mainly focus on cameraless and UV required processes, and founding the Photopacine podcast in 2021, where I chat with other photographers wanting to explore more eco-conscious ways of working. I'm an associate of the Royal Photographic Society UK, hold an MA in photography with distinction, and I'm also a part-time PhD researcher with Falmouth University, exploring how eco-photography can mediate between humans and the rights of rivers. But I'll come back to more about my practice, projects and processes later. As a part of the presentation, I am briefly highlighting two of the books that have informed my personal and academic research in recent years, plus some of the eco-photographers I have connected with. But I do want to note that there is so much more available and from differing perspectives to mine. So I hope this session will inspire you, wherever you are based, or whatever your background, to find or expand on an eco-photography calling. To begin, this slide is a provocation to you. Throughout this talk, I'd like you to keep pondering the question, photography has the power to reveal and to heal, but what if the medium itself causes harm? Attendees at the festival are all here because of their passion for the medium. We are drawn to it for its ability to help us share our stories, to make connection, to democratise, to build community and speak truth to power. But for all its positive attributes, we cannot get away from the negative environmental and social impact of its history and its material production. Yet we are all aware in greater or lesser degrees of its historic and current dependence on natural resources, how those resources are obtained, and how we move between its use to raise awareness of environmental or social matters and its own environmental and social issues. I hope this talk will inspire you to consider photography's complex story and to find your happy eco place within it. In my practice, I use the term eco-conscious photography, or for short, eco-photography, to explain how I try to produce my artworks. I perceive eco-photography as the overarching desire to create work in planet-considerate and process-considered ways, while sustainable photography focuses more on the physical and practical outcomes of that desire. So I describe myself as an eco-photographic artist employing sustainable techniques where I can. But can photography be eco in the sense that many may understand the term? Is it eco-friendly, for instance? Its existence relies on many inputs from basic to complex, depending on what you use and how you share your work. But as I said, for me, the eco in photography is found in being eco-conscious, to evaluating your practice and seeking ways to work that can incrementally lessen your photographic footprint in the long term. So let's briefly consider the terms ecological and sustainable. The term ecological relates to ecology, which is the scientific study of how living things interact with each other and with their environment. In simple terms, ecological refers to the relationships between plants, animals, people, and the physical world, such as air, water, and soil. Here are a few key ways the word is used. In a scientific context, ecological balance refers to a healthy, stable relationship among species and their environment. Ecological systems, or the ecosystem, is a community of living organisms interacting with their physical surroundings. In environmental concerns, ecological impact means the effect something has on the environment, such as pollution, deforestation, or climate change. An ecological crisis describes situations where the environment is being severely harmed, such as mass extinction or rising global temperatures. And for ecological living, an ecological footprint is a way to measure how much a person or group uses natural resources, while ecological living itself refers to lifestyles that reduce harm to the environment, like using renewable energy or reducing waste. In short, ecological describes anything that affects, studies, or takes into account the natural relationships and systems that sustain life on Earth. The term sustainable means something that can be maintained or continued over time without causing harm, especially to the environment, society, or future generations. Different contexts include environmental sustainability. So this means using natural resources like water, trees, or fossil fuels in a way that doesn't use them up or damage ecosystems. An example could be planting a tree for every one that is cut down. Economic sustainability is creating systems where people can earn a living and economies can grow without causing environmental destruction or social inequality. So maybe perhaps supporting local eco-friendly businesses help creates local jobs and reduces carbon emissions from shipping. Social sustainability, building communities that are healthy, fair and resilient, where people's rights and well-being are protected. So that could be ensuring clean water and education for all. In everyday life, sustainable products or actions are those that are eco-friendly and long-lasting. So trying to use reusable bags instead of plastic ones, eating locally grown food where you can, or riding a bike instead of driving a car. So in short, sustainable means meeting our own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet theirs. It's about balance, living well today while ensuring the planet, its people and its resources are protected for tomorrow. But how does this translate to photography? In the past decade or so, the interest in eco and sustainable photography practice has boomed. This is great to witness, but I have been concerned that it can seem a too simple panacea for photographic practitioners. We cannot get away from the extractive and resource-dependent nature of the medium we love, and acknowledging this under the eco-conscious and sustainable photography umbrella is a vital, even if a somewhat painful realisation. Are we simply trying to justify our use of photography with its environmental impact by working this way, or can we truly lessen and limit the material effects of the photographic? For me, eco and sustainable photography represents a fundamental mind shift in how a photographic artist foregrounds environmental integrity in subject matter and image production. It is being mindful of our creative outputs on and within the natural and social ecosystems in which we work, integrating ethical, ecological and community concerns into every stage of the creative process. It can be the materials and technology we choose, the places we work and where we work, the techniques we apply, the people we affect, and how our images interact with the wider world all play a role in an eco-conscious and sustainable practice. Key characteristics of such a practice include low impact processes. Photographers employing sustainable methods often use alternatives to conventional photographic chemicals, such as plant-based developers, chlorophyll or anther-type techniques. These can minimise toxic waste and reduce the environmental footprint of the production process. Material responsiveness. This can include using recycled, upcycled or locally sourced materials in the creation of prints and artwork, and by doing so, the artist reduces reliance on industrial production methods or long-distance deliveries that contribute to environmental degradation. Site-specific and ephemeral art. Eco-photography often embraces ideas of impermanence. It mimics the natural cycles of growth, decay and renewal rather than striving for permanent, unchanging images. Community and interdisciplinary engagement. Eco-photographers often work collaboratively with local communities, Indigenous groups and environmental activists, ensuring that their work resonates with and supports sustainable practices beyond the gallery or exhibition space. So why now? Well, the focus on eco and sustainable photography is particularly pertinent today as we respond to broader global challenges and cultural shifts. Environmental problems, amidst escalating concerns about climate change, habitat destruction and resource scarcity, eco-photography emerges as a powerful medium for both documenting and instigating change. It provides a means to highlight the urgent need for environmental considerations. Re-evaluating artistic practices. There is a growing recognition within the creative community that artistic practices cannot remain isolated from their environmental context. By exploring sustainable methods, photographers are leading the charge in reducing the ecological impact of their work, inspiring a shift in the broader art world. And cultural and Indigenous perspectives. Eco-photography intersects significantly with Indigenous worldviews that often emphasise harmony with nature. Embracing these perspectives enriches the narrative of sustainability and ensures that voices traditionally marginalised in mainstream art are amplified. You may be aware that the beginning of the eco-art movement formulated in the 1960s and 70s. It grew alongside rising ecological awareness and the environmental activism of that era in a Western context. For example, the work of Rachel Carson in her book Silent Spring, published in 1962, is noted as sparking the burgeoning environmental movement. Based on clear evidence of the environmental and health dangers of pesticides in use at that time, it catalysed public demand for policy change and led to the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, in the United States in 1970. This was obviously alongside the myriad activities of people around the world whose culture has always sought to support the interconnectedness of life on Earth, or who were working to effect environmental improvements at the same time. Examples include the Alaska Native Claims Movement, which sought to protect their lands and secure recognition of their rights, the Forest Protection Chipko movement in India, the Maasai resistance to land dispossession in Kenya and Tanzania, and the Andean indigenous land struggles in Peru and Bolivia. Movements such as these have fed into the ongoing challenge of natural resource use to support the human-centric world we have built. There are now multiple organisations working to caretake the natural world, to find solutions to problems, to mitigate human impact, or to return to a more sustainable lifestyle. And eco-art is another way humans can address this challenge. It often blends science, community, engagement, activism and environmental ethics. Its core principles are driven by environmental concern, considered production such as artwork that will biodegrade, participatory and co-created activities that involve others, interdisciplinary methods such as engaging with scientists, and ethical and regenerative artworks that support ecosystems. This is mirrored in the growing interest in sustainable ways of making images. Eco-photography is driving a new way of making pictures with purpose. And in the words of T.J. Demos, art can open up other ways of knowing, imagining and sensing the world, ways that are crucial to transforming the destructive relations to the environment that dominate the present. Although eco-art can be placed in a Western context as materialising from the growing understanding of how modern-day areas of tech, industry, agriculture, and home comforts impacted on the natural world of the 60s onwards, eco-photography is a much more recent subject matter. It could be said that the transfer to digital photography in the late 80s and early 90s was thought to herald a much cleaner and environmentally friendly means of image making. There would be no more toxic photochemicals in use, for example. But we now know that this is not the case. Plus, there has, as there often is with fashion, a cyclical return to what was before, which for photography is seeing people embrace an analogue workflow once more, often combining it with digital. And this is how I tend to work, but neither are without impact. It could be suggested that the first Earth Day in 1970 influenced many photographers to begin documenting contemporary environmental degradation, such as deforestation, pollution, and ideas about climate change. A few notable photographers that began concentrating on highlighting environmental issues include Jan Arthur Bertrand, Edward Batinsky, and the late Sebastian Salgado. Photojournalist Arthur Bertrand used aerial photography in his Earth from Above series to impart a message to current and future generations on the need for sustainable development. He also set up the Good Planet Foundation to make ecology and humanism a central issue in order to encourage people to take concrete action for the Earth and its inhabitants. Batinsky also plumped for an aerial aspect in many of his large-scale images of industrial landscapes and natural resource extraction, and in recent years sold 2 large-format photographs raising £455,000 in a matter of hours for the Ukraine war effort. His parents had fled the country in the 1940s. And Salgado became known for his striking black and white images of hardship, conflict and natural beauty, captured across 130 countries over 55 years. And he also supported the reforestation of the region of his birth through the Instituto Terra he founded with his wife. The work of these photographers over time was not without criticism, however. Regardless of the photographer's obvious talent or personal, ethical and environmental stand, some people have questioned whether, for instance, local image makers should be the ones given the opportunity to tell stories of local issues, while terms such as disaster porn are applied to images such as Salgado's, as suffering individuals may be perceived by viewers as only being representative. In my image here, I wanted to honour the death of a mole I had come across at my allotment. It is lying on clover leaves, and as a child I would spend time looking for lucky 4-leaf clovers. This animal hadn't been favoured by good fortune on this day, but the image made me wonder about its death as we garden in a wildlife-friendly way. What had happened? Was it chemicals or was it natural? There's also something strangely beautiful about this moment, or perhaps a tad comedic, as if it is laughing at a joke. Yes, I'm very aware I'm anthropomorphizing now, but this leans into how considerations about how our work is received play a role in an eco-conscious manner. We know we are in the midst of various human-caused environmental emergencies. Issues such as climate change, habitat destruction and resource scarcity are already topics covered in well-known eco-related photographic images. These can call for actions that nurture rather than negate nature and be a powerful instigator for human behaviour change. But eco and sustainable photography is more than a simple documentation activity. Its proponents are committed to re-evaluating their artistic practices as they know that they cannot remain isolated from their environmental context. This includes the tech and industrial footprint of photography, whether digital and its reliance on mined minerals and energy consumption for data storage and processing, or analog with its silver mining for film and papers and the manufacturing of toxic chemicals. In surveying the Anthropocene, environment and photography now, Patricia MacDonald, an environmental, cultural landscape researcher, writer, and academic, guides us through how human activity has reshaped Earth's systems in ways so vast that they may be etched in geological history. And it's alongside an assemblage of over 260 photographs by more than 50 international image makers. And it includes essays and thoughts from writers and thinkers of myriad disciplines. Situating photography's role in revealing environmental change from early industrial landscapes to today's challenges such as climate breakdown, ecosystem collapse and biodiversity loss, MacDonald argues in the book that modern photographic practice, which is deeply informed by science, philosophy and environmental activism, is uniquely positioned to render visible the invisible forces shaping the Anthropocene. The book includes contributions from renowned photographers like the previously mentioned Batinsky to emerging voices like Merrill McMaster, who explores the self in relation to land, lineage, history, culture, and the more than human world, and whose haunting portraits evoke vulnerability and resilience in non-human life. Photographs such as Greg White's depiction of Ladakh ice stupas showcase inventive response to melting glaciers, blending aesthetics with adaptation strategies. Accompanying the images are essays by environmental commentators such as Siobhan Lyon's take on ruin lust or ruin porn, The Perils of the Fossil Fuel Industry from Bill McKibben, George Monbiot's support for rewilding, and Adam Nicholson's call to nurture an age of empathy with all life. Their texts help to cement the images in scientific, political and ethical contexts, and helping to move them from mere spectacle into critical reflection. To address potential criticism that the images risk aestheticizing trauma, such as that raised by Susan Sontag in Regarding the Pain of Others, MacDonald pairs the photographs with critical reviews to avoid desensitisation but garner emotional reactions and potentially action. This need to ensure an environment-minded image is more than a simple snapshot is what helps underpin an eco-conscious way of working and supports a photographer to push back against any challenge to their motive or dissemination. In summary, surveying the Anthropocene is an example of how considered images, particularly when combined with supporting words, can become more than a coffee table keepsake and act as a both memorial and catalyst. It can lay bare the wounds humanity has inflicted, while also illuminating paths toward repair, restoration, technology, justice, and reconnection with the more than human world. The book is a timely and visually arresting provocation that challenges readers not to just witness, but to respond thoughtfully and urgently to our era's ecological crises. In the 2022 book, Mining Photography, The Ecological Footprint of Image Production, by authors Levin, Ralphs and Bayerl, they contribute to this discourse by examining the material dependencies of photographic practices, from early analogue processes to contemporary digital imaging. It connects to debates on extractive capitalism, media materialism, and ecological responsibility in image production. Photography's past runs from the use of fossil fuels such as bitumen and carbon in its early days, to copper and silver, which, at the photographic industry's peak, was responsible for more than half of the world's silver consumption, through to rare earths and metals like cobalt and europium used in smartphones. The authors highlight early photographic discoveries such as the daguerreotype process, introduced in 1839. This relied on silver. The silver was sourced through colonial mining operations, particularly in Latin America, and the book spotlights the Bolivian Potosi silver mines, where for centuries the material extracted bolstered wealth in Europe while causing environmental and social devastation in situ. This brings to mind the term solastalgia, coined by philosopher Glenn Albrecht. It categorises the distress that is produced by environmental change impacting on people while they are directly connected to their home environment. It followed his work with communities in Australia experiencing persistent drought in rural areas of, and the impact of large-scale open-cut coal mining on individuals in New South Wales. His research highlighted how people exposed to environmental change experience negative effects that are exacerbated by a sense of powerlessness or lack of control over the unfolding change process. Given that Eastman Kodak, the company behind the democratization of photography from its earlier, more wealthy practitioners, was in effect a chemical company, would it be fair to posit that some of those living close by, perhaps like the people of Potosi, may have felt a sense of solastalgia as they lived alongside the firm's chemical emissions and pollutants released into local ecosystems, or the centuries-old silver mining activities? According to Siobhan Angus's chapter, The Eastman Kodak Silver Vault, in the book, between 1980 and 2000, so not that long ago, the company produced more toxic emissions than any other company in New York State. So how do we square this potential human environmental impact as photographers in pursuit of our passion? When you see pictures made to raise awareness of environmental issues that should concern us, does it trouble you that the medium used to tell the story has, and is, also resource reliant and based on extractive consumption? Does it seem a double standard? But how can we change this? Eco-conscious thinking and sustainable practices in photography are a start. Its purpose stands at a confluence of environmental and social justice. By documenting the impacts of environmental degradation on diverse communities, photographers are using their work as a form of advocacy, making the case that sustainable practices are not just an artistic choice, but a social imperative. Rather than simply being a photographic flaneur, or observer and recorder of the world, the role of the eco-aware photographer has evolved to be a more active participant in the quest for a more balanced, equitable and sustainable world. As the authors of Mining Photography, the Ecological Footprint of Image Production call for a critical reassessment of photographic practices and propose that artists, curators and historians should address these concerns more explicitly. In summary, eco-conscious and sustainable photography is not only about creating art that is gentler on our planet, but also about using the art as a catalyst to reimagine our relationship with the environment, each other, and photography itself. So what about me as an eco-photo artist? I'm predominantly interested in the intersection of photography, ecology, botany, hydrology and environmental activism to bolster solutions to climate and ecological emergencies. My primary focus is water-related environments, so the riverine, the marine, the inland and the coastal, with a leaning towards abstract photography to inspire and channel eco-activism. But where did it all start? I like to think my photographic journey began back in the 70s when I tried to use my parents' Polaroid camera on our occasional holidays. The whir of the machine and the magic of the image materialising stayed with me. And although told by my secondary school careers advisor that I should think about a proper job, rather than follow my teenage proposal to become a war photographer as a means to try to highlight the realities of battle, I did go on to study photography, and I took on roles as commercial photographer's assistant, portrait studio manager and a medical photographer twice, once when I still had to chemically process medical images, and the next embracing the introduction of digital. It was after retraining as a journalist and a few years spent covering local news that I felt the pull back to my photographic roots and to marry my news sense with my interest in environmental matters. With current geopolitics at the time of writing this presentation in June 2025 from a UK-based perspective, it may seem as if there has never been a better time to look at your creative practice and pivot towards an eco-conscious and sustainable perspective. But it's not always easy being green as an eco-conscious photographer, and you will have to find balance on your own terms. We'll now look at how I work as an artist, trying to balance my love for photography with my desire to do better for the earth through some of the projects that I have developed. Around 2011, I collaborated with a friend to set up the first iteration of Shutterpod. This was a community-focused project seeking to support accessible engagement with photography in Cornwall. Then, in 2014, I organised the first photographic mini-festival in Cornwall with Nuki Art 8, before successfully crowdfunding to evolve Shutterpod into the eco-darkroom it is today, with an emphasis on sustainable and eco-orientated processes and community inclusion. I did this while still holding down my full-time day job and trying to build my personal eco-photo arts practice. And to enhance the latter, I decided to take on a Masters in Photography from 2016 to 2018 with Falmouth University. It was at this time my external interests in the environment, such as my time spent previously volunteering for Greenpeace, truly met my passion for photography. Although a badge-wearing supporter of the power of photography to influence people, it did rub alongside an uncomfortableness about my use of such a potentially damaging art form. Think back to the initial provocation. I began to ask myself how I could justify using materials and mechanics that rely so much on extractive systems I knew very little about. I wondered about the working conditions for those involved in the photographic supply chain. I wondered about how much water is used in traditional and digital photo processes, how communities are affected by photography's manufacturing needs, and who else is thinking about this. At this stage, I had already been experimenting with alternative processes such as anthotype, unfixed lumen and cyanotype as a mean to lessen my photographic footprint. In 2017, I was commissioned by Cornwall Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty and the University of Exeter's Environment and Sustainability Institute, the ESI for short, to illustrate their 6,000 Flowers Farm for AOMB's Bee Science project through these processes, and I'm pictured here at the exhibition's opening event. The Farm for AOMB's project sought to make a significant difference to the quality of Cornwall's landscapes for conservation and food production. At its core sat a computer program developed in Professor Juliet Osborne's Pollinators Research Group at the ESI that replicated the foraging and colony survival of bees in realistic landscapes. The ESI and the Cornwall Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty were conducting real-time testing of the computer program on agricultural holdings by working with 5 farms across the area. Thinking back to the eco-art movement and how this transpires into our current eco and sustainable photography approach, you can see the interdisciplinary aspects at play. My work drew on the science behind this project and its importance in helping understand more about bees' health, survival and pollination. Springtime sees queen bumblebees visiting up to 6,000 flowers per day to collect enough nectar and pollen to establish a colony. However, the spring season can see a shortfall in the availability of high-quality flowers across agricultural landscapes. I chose the anthotype and cyanotype processes to symbolise the fragility, precarity and interconnectedness of bee ecology. The anthotype light-sensitive emulsions I used came from berries pollinated by bees and vegetables grown by farmers and would fade away if not carefully stored and displayed, while the cyanotype harked back to days of more abundance and connection to the botanical via Anna Atkins, plus its relevant low environmental impact if used correctly, hinting at human intervention and our impacts. The pastoral images were made by combining digital images I had taken of farmland scenes with Victorian botanical illustrations and speaking to a sense that what we see as idyllic or nostalgic may be hiding a human impact. Working with scientists and people from other disciplines always brings additional aspects to my creative outputs. Having the support of Dr. Grace Twiston-Davies, the ESI Research Associate on the project, was instrumental in my understanding of the goals. But this collaborative work shows that despite my desire to create with minimal impact, I am forever making compromises in my eco-orientated decisions to create my artwork. And unless we stop using photography, we will always be doing so, no matter which low-impact photographic process or equipment we use. For example, to share our work wider than our locality demands this. So I remind you that eco-photography is an umbrella under which to sit and consider your photographic actions, and to find that balance in making work and addressing environmental concerns. I'll move on to my Elemental EDOS series. This is an example of how, as a photographic artist, I was able to wrestle with the ideas of mining and how that related to my own practice. I was commissioned by the Impact Project to respond to the Of Earth for Earth exhibition held at Heartlands in Cornwall in early March 2020, which was also part of an international conference and a book considering sustainable mining practices. Living in Cornwall, its heritage and culture is inextricably linked to mining, and this seemed a great opportunity to look at the industry in more detail. My images were inspired by a waveform array, sometimes seen in a geological sampling technique known as cathodoluminescence. This microanalyzes light emitted by a mineral or gemstone when excited by an electron source and can illuminate our geological history. The images of this to me are beautiful and awe-inspiring, and with the aim of sparking conversation about how we can mine sustainably, it ignited a sense of play in me by tying these images of gems to a love of kaleidoscopes and to imbue a sense of wonder and encourage discussions at the event and beyond about a challenging topic. To support my 2D images at the exhibition, I also designed and commissioned a handheld and handmade kaleidoscope by the very talented Frank Higgins from Kaleidoscope Studio, UK. The purpose of this was to provide a tactile means of empowering discussion about sustainable mining. The kaleidoscope also used my images, and you can see those here. To develop my response fully, I worked with scientists, geologists and mine-related experts, and this harks back to the elements of eco-art previously mentioned. This included Dr. Catherine Moore, who's gained degree qualifications in geology, experimental petrology and archaeology from the University of Edinburgh, University of Bristol and the National University of Ireland, Galway. She led the Magmatic Studies Group at the National University of Ireland from 1999 and moved to the Camborne School of Mines in Cornwall in 2012 as a lecturer in critical and green technology metals. She participates in and supervises research relating to alkaline rocks, carbonatites, ore deposits, particularly critical metals, and small-scale mining. I'm no scientist, although I am forever fascinated by science, so this type of relationship is fundamental in helping me understand, as an artist, the topics my work portrays. To make the images, I employed a hybrid unfixed lumen digital process, combining negatives from cathodoluminescence images and sand and earth. My eco-conscious thinking for the project related to how I made the images, such as photographic materials. In this case, cathodoluminescence images combined with expired black and white photo paper and digital post-production. Display materials. How would I print and display the artworks? I chose 6 final artworks to limit production and opted for them to be printed by the carbon neutral The Print Space in London, and to encourage a tactile way for exhibition visitors to immerse themselves in the exhibition's purpose relating to thinking about mining in sustainable ways. I opted to also make the additional kaleidoscope. Travel. This was part of an international symposium, so I felt my work had the ability to inform and inspire on a wider network. Although my work was made locally, including the cathodoluminescence images coming from staff at the Camborne School of Mines, and other than the delivery of the printed images, many people visited the UK just before the first COVID lockdown, and travel for ourselves and those who sit in-person shows is another conundrum for eco-conscious artists. Online opportunity abounded when we had to pivot our lives during COVID. It created ways to reach wider audiences more easily and cost-effectively. Yet the digital space is not without major environmental considerations. Again, as eco-conscious artists, we need to find our own comfortable place in which to sit when making work. Being a part of the subsequent 116-page full-colour hardback book of the same name, Of Earth for Earth, published by Exeter Press and edited by Catherine Moore, Dana Finch and Bridget Story, is one of the ways being involved as an artist felt beneficial. Consisting of dialogue between artists, community representatives, industrialists and educators, the book provided a long-term way to share ideas and encourage discussion. The book contains images from the exhibition, and many other artists have contributed to it with images and text. In the book online description, it states, the book aims to inspire debate about human interactions with the earth while our consumption of resources grows ever larger and the environments on which we depend face an uncertain future. This book speaks to our sense of belonging to place, time, natural and cultural heritage. It describes the geologically grounded and contested places in which mining inspires our relationship with Earth and interrogates our commitment to change. Through dialogue and debate, perhaps we may unearth mechanisms to carve out a more sustainable relationship with the Earth while maintaining access to the resources that will support the global population. In the editor's foreword, they note the pronoun mine and its definition of belonging to me. They explain the book speaks to our sense of belonging to place, time, natural and cultural heritage, to our attachment to the planet, our environ, our homeland, and the further landscapes we choose to access or seek to protect. But also how we, humans, try to assert ownership of the earth, buying land to call our own, using it for the resources on which we depend, including to express ourselves through art. The book speaks to our consumption, alteration, and appreciation of the earth. But the editors acknowledge the meaning of a mine too. They note that this is a fixed thing, a place of commerce and conflict, a place of innovation and industry, a community for those working within, and a history stretching way back. But the book aims to highlight how mining practices can evolve, to find new ways of operating, and to find hope in unearthing mechanisms to carve out a more sustainable relationship with the earth, while maintaining access to the support global populations in the societies we have created. With the reopening of local mines and the new lithium extraction projects taking place in Cornwall, it will be interesting to follow how this operates here on my doorstep. Coming to my Arena Now series, this embodies my ongoing interest in finding ways to create work that is eco-conscious and sustainable. It also earned me a distinction for my MA. It investigates the global sand crisis through unfixed lumen printing and digital manipulation. My motivation for this work is twofold. Firstly, it is to raise the profile of this lesser-known environmental issue that is having dire consequences not only on sea and river ecosystems, but human life too. Secondly, it challenges the response to human-made environmental problems through the use of abstract imagery and investigates if this aesthetic can prompt action. Some experts predict that due to the booming demand for sand in industries such as construction and beach renourishment, sand may run out. That seems impossible for such a ubiquitous material. It also seems unimaginable that this has also led to a growth in sand mafias, and people have lost their homes, their livelihoods, and even their lives. I opted to use expired black and white photo paper and a camera-less process without chemical solutions to co-create images at coastal locations using sand, sunlight, and sometimes seawater. This provided a means for the environment to make its mark. With the simple digital fixer technique I devised, changed the original image to a more vivid and arresting final version. Arena is the Latin word for sand. It also symbolises sandy places, such as the seashore, but also an arena or place of contest. As the developing environmental humanitarian issues surrounding our use of sand is most definitely a battle, for those trying to survive and make a living, for the wildlife and habitats caught up in the process, and for those trying to determine a solution, it is apt that arena signifies the material, sand, and implies conflict. The Arena Now images meld various sources of inspiration, from the passage of time to geology, the microscopic to the vast, the anthropocentric to ecocentric ideologies, and the past to the present. This, and my other bodies of work, bring us back to how, if we want to create in more eco-conscious and sustainable ways, we reach a balance in our methods. In the research and creation of this project, my deliberations looked at my choice to use expired photo paper, because it at least makes use of a product that for pristine photographic printing wouldn't be up to scratch. My choice not to employ traditional photo fixer in the lumen process as a means to minimise chemical use. My choice to use digital fixer techniques to manipulate the final image, which rely on manufacture of computers and data storage. My choice of how to promote this work through online hosting, online collaboration and in-person exhibition, which includes the printing of images and the options used to make this as eco and sustainable as possible. And my choice to cover a story not instantly recognisable as a UK story, but perhaps considered something that happens elsewhere. Yet the further I looked into this, the more I found this issue is occurring on my doorstep, with groups such as Save Our Sands Hail campaigning for years right up to the present day to ensure their local dune and beach habitats are not damaged through activity such as dredging and sand removal. I connected with others during my research, such as the incredibly knowledgeable Kieran Pereira from Sand Stories, plus the work of director Dennis Dellis-Jack with the film Sand Wars, and the book Sand, A Journey Through Science and the Imagination by the late Michael Welland, a geologist and sand expert and a renophile. It is this interconnectedness of ideas, of knowledge, of creativity that feeds into my eco-conscious activity and underpins why I try to make work that intrigues and sparks conversation. One of the positives of projects such as Arena Now has been its longevity, not necessarily in the continuation of making new images, but in how I can continue to keep sharing this work to new audiences. Just this week I received a copy of a zine, Boulder Dash, dedicated to enthusiasts of stones, drones and noise. The editor kindly shared more about my project, taking its message to new people and hopefully encouraging a spark of curiosity to find out more for themselves. As a self-confessed rock hound, as part of the article I'd said, "Listen close, the shoreline hums with the singing of stones and the waves push and pull the shingle and a melodic waltz. Sand, the most minuscule of weathered and eroded rocks, arrives from afar in time and location." For me, this is another important aspect of eco and sustainable photography practices. It's not just in the physical materials that you can work towards improving your photographic impact, but in how you evolve the storytelling of your work too. Working as an artist can at times seem a lonesome pastime. It's good to collaborate when you can, and interdisciplinary engagement is a great way to motivate new ideas. But I also wanted to meet and chat with other artists starting to use photography in eco-conscious ways. So in 2021, I started the Photopacine podcast. I believe this is the time when photography is having and has had a significant impact on the world we live. So my podcast brings together other photographers passionate about using their talents to raise awareness of environmental issues and/or devising sustainable photographic practices. It enables me to share eco-conscious photography in an audio way. I'm going to introduce you to some of my 41 guests. It was so hard to select as they are all working in wonderful ways, so please head over and listen to them all if you can. And after a sabbatical in the past year or so, I will be recording new episodes in the coming months in 2025, so please feel free to get in touch if you'd like to take part. I'll start with Sarah Connell. It was a joy to discover more about this very creative, hopeful caterpillar, Sarah's self-description, and how she uses analogue photography to explore the natural world and encourage contemplation. Sarah works exclusively in black and white and is fascinated by the alchemy of the darkroom. At the time of recording, Sarah had recently been awarded an Arts Council England grant for a new research project on the Yorkshire Moors, where she would be employing cameraless techniques and plant-based processes to delve deeper into the world of sustainable photography. Since our chat, Sarah has taken part in a residency in 2024 with the Studio 8 Collective. She's exhibited in Beyond the Frame, at Interrupt for Queer Fest, the Queer Beach, and with Destination Dartmoor, and also in Brazil. You can find Sarah on Instagram at always.analog, and her website is sarahconnell.co.uk. I love how art and science can collide, and photography is the perfect medium for it to do so. In this episode, I spoke with Liz, who shared her enthralling background as a geologist with a PhD in paleoclimatology and how this led to her photographic career. We talk about fossils, curiosity, patience, or lack of, origami, and a playfulness in photography, while we uncovered more about her stunning and varied photographic series and how she moves from studio-based construction to outdoor experimentation. Since our chat, Liz has gone on to do some amazing things, such as being shortlisted for Earth Photo with Forestry England, the Royal Geographical Society and Parker Harris, being commissioned by the National Trust for its Freshwater Renaissance project, and being the Digital Arts and Natural Environment Artist in Residence with Somerset Film. Head over to her website, elizabethwudger.com, to discover more, and you can find her on Instagram at Elizabeth Wudger too. I was blown away by Maria's work for El Libro de Arena, the Book of Sand. Perhaps a little biased due to my Harina Now series, this is a fascinating look at the story of a sand dune, intertwined with history and intrigue in a place I know little about other than its well-known name. Maria explains the long-term project acts as a metaphor of the absurd will of humanity to dominate nature while remaining separate from her, while it also delves into the social, environmental and political issues behind the formation of the dune. It was such an honour to learn much more about Maria's work and about Maria herself. And since our chat, Maria has, as a part of her research to reduce the ecological footprint in the creative process, has been creating handmade pinhole cameras with expired 35mm rolls that she had preserved from her analogue days. And this year she also returned to the Ecuadorian Amazon to deliver workshops as a follow-up to her time there in 2018. You can visit mariaprimo.com or find Maria on Instagram at mariaprimo to discover more. And what an absolutely fascinating conversation I had with Steffi. Steffi is a Dutch-Italian interdisciplinary researcher who works at the intersection of architecture, art and anthropology. Her work, at the time of the podcast recording, Permanence, investigates the River Dommel in relation to her heritage, colonialism, extractivism and contamination as a means to approach the entanglements of earthly life. Since our conversation, Steffi has been furthering her research and has also founded Studio Ditch, an artistic research practice focused on bridging environmental degradation to colonial legacies through the traces left by material flows, organic matter and beyond human indices. Visit her website steffidigatano.net, and you can also follow her on Instagram as well. In my conversation with award-winning photographer Jamie, we investigated his incredible practice which melds research, process and diverse disciplines to explore the intersections of art, science and nature through the lens of post-humanism, or simply put, the decentralising of humans and accounting for non-humans. Our conversation goes from an 11-year-old Jamie discovering the joy of experimentation through pinhole photography to one of his most recent creations, GHY-3, which was an immersive sound installation exploring insect communication and satellites at Goonhilly in Cornwall. There was talk of what inspired Jamie, from hidden histories to different realms and new ways of seeing and attentive listening to the world around us. Jamie is a British Photography Award recipient and Associate Lecturer on the MA Photography course at the University of Plymouth, UK. He has presented his work at international and national symposia and exhibited and published widely. Since our chat, Jamie has published his book, Transmissions, Speculative Field Studies at the Goonhilly Downs SSI Earth Station. In this, he explores the post-human dynamics of the Anthropocene. Insects communicating in the soil beneath satellite transmissions, sonic reverberations, rare plant life that clings to abandoned bunkers, and the encroaching climate disaster. Through his encounters and explorations, Goonhilly Downs becomes a space for contemplating the intelligence, agency, and resonance within these more than human worlds. You can visit Jamie on Instagram to find out more and keep up to date with his work at J_AIME_H. And contributor to the festival, Stig was one of my earliest guests on the podcast. My conversation with him took me to the jungles of the Amazon, mountains in Spain, and the forests of Norway. Stig is a photographer based in Norway who often employs cameraless techniques and photographic materials to interpret his interest in how he see and sees the world. We spoke about how to let go to make art, how to challenge yourself to keep your work fresh, and how to focus on short and long-term projects. Since our chat, Stig has taken part in Experimental Photo Festival delivering workshops, been a guest lecturer at Oslo Photo Art School, and continues to visit many photo exhibitions and also has one on at the moment in Vienna. You can see Stig's work on his website western.no or on Instagram at stigmw. So following my MA, alongside my creative practice and my podcast, I went to work for a charity protecting rivers and their habitats. Learning more about the plight of the UK's freshwater environments spurred me on to apply for a part-time practice-based PhD, which I began in 2022. My research is exploring how eco-photography can mediate between humans and the rights of rivers. It's about how we listen to what our freshwater spaces are telling us and how we can connect to this in an area where access to safe water is on tap. It's about a sense of place and our relationship with the ever-moving world of water, something so necessary for survival yet slips through our fingers. It has led me down fascinating avenues, from phytoremediation, which is the power of plants to remove toxins from land and water, to plant intelligence and the awareness of riverside flora in living alongside polluted waterways. Currently, my research is drawing me to how women seem to be so inextricably linked to water through art, eco and sustainable photography, and in a global societal context. I am now considering this to discover if what draws me to fresh water, which is something I can't quite seem to put my finger on, I can't even swim, is what draws other women to water. An example of this is the work of Emmeline Hardesty and the charitable organisation she's just set up in the UK, the Voices of Water Foundation. Having already supported Emmeline in research for a film, Veins of the Earth, her passion for rivers and the Reas in the UK and Cornwall where we are based is infectious. This new venture will see her taking a river pilgrimage along a Celtic route from Cornwall to South Wales this summer. She will meet with many rivers, sacred water spaces, and people sharing their knowledge of British Indigenous rivers and water history and spirituality, as well as those protecting and advocating for the voice of their local waterways. I will be one of those people, and I will be speaking to Emmeline about how my practice is linked to water in so many ways, and how my PhD research is looking how we can build kinship with these freshwater spaces. One of the most important things I believe we need to do as an eco-photographic artist is to always be learning, open to ideas, willing to share knowledge, and finding ways to explore and introduce others to our projects. The Experimental Photo Festival is a fabulous example of this. Recent examples of mine include the work I have done with the Blue Minds project supporting student mental well-being via Falmouth University, the West Country Artivist to Enhance Rivers community project I fundraise for to support people in reconnecting to local streams through creative sight and sound workshops, and curating the Waters of Sulis collaboration for Fringe Arts Bath 2024. The West Country Artivists to Enhance Rivers community project heralded a way to connect people to freshwater spaces through sensory triggers. This eco-conscious collaboration enabled art to enhance the ecological understanding of the riverine through playful immersion. I joined sound artist Dr. Harry Ovington to marry my hands-on making of cyanotype prints using riverside foliage with his underwater audio recordings to hear the water in a new way. The aim was to co-create photographic and sound activities to spark river kinship. Following the event, some of the participants said, "The session is informative, creative and relaxing. I did things I haven't done before. Thank you, I felt fortunate to attend." Amazing. I'm inspired to creating art with my class at school. I loved that I was looking at ordinary objects from a new lens, and listening to a stream I know well was magical. Excellent morning. So lovely to slow down and listen, look, talk and create so interconnectedly with water. My whole system feels grounded and peaceful afterwards. Thank you. This type of community engagement can form a wonderful part of an eco-conscious creative practice and is always worth considering as you shape your own research. The Waters of Sulis collaboration for Fringe Arts Bath 2024 involved a call out for other eco-conscious photo artists to share what fresh water means to them through abstract images made with the full collaboration of the riverine. The aim was to raise the profile of water security in the UK and offer mediation between people and fresh water. In addition to the selected artists, I worked with sound artist Harry Ovington to expand on sensory perspectives and broaden how we can build kinship with freshwater habitats. Along with talks and workshops at the event, I created a zine to highlight the work of the participating artists and share their interpretations. Some of the artists involved include Andreas Schultz, who highlighted his ongoing series And So I Watch You From Afar, which compromises cyanotypes resembling crashing waves, satellites' views of the Earth, or storm formations. He wants the work to spark reflections on environmental themes like climate change and shifting geographies due to rising sea levels, while his process interrogates eco-conscious materials such as watercolour paper, seaweed, sand, and natural elements, which not only contribute to the archival quality of the artwork, but also deepen its hues over time. Andreas feels this sustainable approach creates visually captivating pieces that catalyse conversations about our interconnectedness with the environment and the pressing issues it confronts. You can see more of Andreas's work on Instagram at Andreas Schultz. Another participant was Holly Sanderford. She speaks of walking along the river at night and how she feels strangely safe and held, her body harmonising with its sounds, smells and rhythm. She says the moon's reflection follows her as she walks, and the fear she often feels walking in the dark disappears. Holly created images for The Moon Follows Me As I Walk with soil from 50 sites along the River Wensum in Norwich, UK. She added, "It is a sensuous engagement with the soil. Collecting and making feeds my microbiome and stills my mind. The chemistry in the soil along the river is influenced by the urban environment that surrounds it, inviting us to reflect on our relationship to our rivers and how we treat them. You can find out more about Holly on Instagram at holly.sanderford. And finally, I've chosen Sankave Ketheralingam. Sankave explained her work was inspired by hunger stones, a hydrological landmark common in Central Europe, but this was something I hadn't been aware of. Sankave said the stones were marked during drought to warn future generations that hardship was coming if the water reached that level, but now they are marked every time they have been seen, and due to climate change, it is happening more and more often. You can discover more on Instagram at x.sankave.x. From my connections with other eco-artists, the thread running through most eco-conscious photographers' motivations is to inspire positive change through the making of their work. I am no different. Yet at times I have felt as though I should hang up my photography hat, as no matter how much I aim to limit my photographic impact through considered application, I still need to do things such as accessing digital platforms, creating prints, or travelling to exhibitions to share my creative vision, which all add to my photographic footprint. When we look at our use of photography closely, we begin to see how its impact multiplies across the world. With my particular interest in freshwater environments, the topics I cover from land access rights to sand mining or plastic pollution to our ageing process and our use of water as a much needed resource, I'm reminded of photography's material production, the water needed to process data or alternative and traditional printing. At times it can all seem overwhelming. So to lessen the conundrum of producing work against not producing work, due to my desire to be as least damaging to my environment, I've started to change my mindset to find my comfortable place. For me, this is a joy as an act of resilience. And through my eco-photography aspirations, I aim to nurture this personally and to encourage others to do so too. I hope you find your balance within photography through eco-conscious considerations and a move to sustainable practices where possible. And I hope it will bring you much, much joy. So let's take a look at some of the techniques that you could try. I've spoken about some of the processes I have used in my practice. There is still so much more for you to consider. Imagine being able to source vegetation from your garden to make images or to mix to make up your own film developer. The following slides share a few ideas for processes you can research further or possibly even try out while at the festival. Let's start with anthotype. This is a delicate process taking the pigment of crushed plant matter and exposing it to sunlight to form ethereal prints that can fade if not cared for correctly. The process has played an important part in my ways of working, such as the 6,000 Flowers project previously mentioned. I have used it often to make images with nature and love to use produce from my allotment to supply me with my botanical emulsions. Please note, if you want to try out this process, you must understand the plants you want to use, as although making solutions with plants may seem safe, some specimens are irritants or poisons and must be handled with caution or not at all. This technique is attributed to several individuals, with Henry August Vogel discovering that plant juices were sensitive to light in 1816. This was then followed by Theodor von Grothus, who in 1817 noted that absorbed light rays are active in the production of chemical changes, while Sir John Herschel led extensive research and published his findings in 1842. It was Mary Somerville who expanded research into the action of rays on vegetable juices, but thanks to the narrow-minded attitude of her society back in the mid-1800s, she couldn't publish her findings because she was a woman. Robert Hunt and Michael Eugene Chevrel also conducted research, with Hunt publishing Researches on Light, which includes a chapter on anthotypes. But there is something about foraging for or growing your own produce from which to make anthotypes. Although nipping to your local store to snap up some spinach or bag some beetroot is a more convenient way to perhaps get started. This is one of those processes where you will need to be patient and ideally have a spot where you can expose your artwork to sunlight for hours or even days. But the ethereal quality and the delicate nature of persevering helps you to connect to nature through image making in a very tactile and embodied manner. Let's next look at the chlorophyll process, another cameraless technique that needs sunlight to bleach positives onto leaves. Learning which plants make the best material is part of the fun, but to get started, I suggest opting for something like a hosta leaf. The image shown here is of my wonderful friend Carly. In 2021, she learned she had an aggressive type of breast cancer called triple negative. She has inspired everyone around her through her subsequent treatment, surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and lymph node removal. As being immersed in nature has given her solace, respite, and hope during this time, she wanted a portrait to reflect this and to celebrate life. There seemed a wonderful synergy with this process and the experience Carly had gone through, as she saw herself very much as part of the natural world. Chlorophyll prints are made by selecting a healthy green leaf, placing a photographic positive directly onto it, pressing both under glass to ensure full contact, exposing the assembly to sunlight for several hours or days, and if possible, fixing the image through natural methods or scanning. One of the most well-known users of this process is Bin Dan, with his series Immortality, the remnants of the Vietnam and American War. For this, he combined archive material within the foliage to express the indelible mark of war. These images can also fade if not stored well, and Dan opted to set his work in resin. Other notable artists that have used the process include Heather Ackroyd and Dan Harvey, a British artist duo who are known for their large-scale photographic installations made from living grass. While not chlorophyll printing on leaves like Dan, their work uses chlorophyll in a similar conceptual and technical way, leveraging photosynthesis and light exposure to form photographic images. You can, of course, try your hand at cyanotypes, one of the most popular processes. This uses two chemicals mixed together to form a light-sensitive solution. It can be used in myriad ways and on many natural materials such as linens, wood or stone, alongside the more usual paper. Objects or negatives can be placed on the solution and exposed to UV to create stunning blue and white images. Anna Atkins is cited as being the first person to create a photo book when she used this technique to hand print and share specimens from a herbarium in 1843. There's also lumen printing. This typically uses expired black and white photo paper on which objects or negatives are placed and exposed to UV. The results can be scanned and manipulated or put through the fixing stage of the black and white printing process. And cyanolumen is a process whereby cyanotype and lumens are mixed. You could consider photography or phytograms, which are made with black and white paper or films, plants bathed in a solution of water, soda and vitamin C, and traditional fixer. Carol Dewing, who has been on my podcast, devised the process in 2016, and you can find out more on his website. There are details coming up. Plant-based developers are an alternative to chemical photo developers, although technically they are still chemical-based, which can be used to process black and white films and paper. Items such as seaweed, nettles, mint tea, coffee or red wine can be used. One of the most experienced researchers is General Tregan, or Andreas Pardo, and he has worked with the UK-based Sustainable Darkroom on a booklet, Back to Basics, A Guide to Ecological Photochemistry, which is a great reference guide and certainly worth a look. Only this week, I received a newsletter from Chiara of Alternative Processes. In it, she describes the research she is now doing on various biomaterials. This includes her plans to experiment with bio-leather made from water, glycerol, baking soda, cornstarch, seed oil and vinegar as a substrate for anthotypes, Polaroid liths, liquid emulsion and cyanotypes. Plus, she is looking at plant-based polymers and bioplastics, but using pectin and alginate rather than gelatin or agar-agar, biocements and biofoam. It sounds very intriguing, so do sign up to her updates if you want to discover more. So whatever techniques you are drawn to, please check out all health and safety elements first and make sure you know what you're doing beforehand. These are just a few organisations or individuals that may be helpful to your eco-photographic learning and experimentation. My Photopacine podcast has over 40 conversations with fellow eco-artists using photography, such as Carol Dewing, who devised the photography technique, Stigman and Weston, who's been part of the festival, and Hannah Fletcher, one of the founders of the Sustainable Darkroom. I simply can't list all the amazing eco-photo practitioners here, but a simple online search will certainly help you. And do please feel free to reach out to me too at josiepurcellphotography.com. So thank you, and I hope you found some of the photographers' projects and suggestions useful, and I hope that you find joy in your eco-photography experimentations. Bye!